can go out there and get them in here. Yes. Yeah.
See, I don't want to have to be the jerk that says most is president. All right. We are going to do the raffles. So I think all the vendors had already picked names from, from the fish bowls or whatever you dropped in. So this has nothing to do with me. I'm not picking a card. I'm just reading a name, okay? Just want to let you know. Nothing to do with me. Must be present to win. So if your name is not called. All right. So the first one is from Prevail. And the winner is Ron Taylor. Awesome. Cool. That's good. Okay. William Allen? No? Yes, William Allen. Nice. All right. All right. Okay. All right. I don't know what vendor. Do you guys know what vendor this one was? The Echo? Veronis? Okay. All right. Well, either way, the winner is Carl Hardy. Carl Hardy? Yes? Is there a Carl Hardy in the building? Oh, okay. Hold on. There's other names in here. There's other names. I thought there was only one name. Okay, next one is Luke Westfield. Luke, I am your father. All right. Ali Kaba. Hey, Ali. Come on, Ali. All right, the next one is, what is this? Oh, it's another set of headphones. Let me try to figure out what vendor this is. Jeez, what is this? It's like... Yeah, I don't know who this is, but... John, come here. Help me figure this out. I want to make sure. I have to have two people just to be clear. Yeah. So I've got this.
I think this is Trent.
Well, yeah, but I've got these names, but then I've got these things here.
Pick one.
Okay. All right. Dan. Tuilleg. Twilledge. How do you say your last? Oh, Dan. Dan. No, Dan's not here. Here, John.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I think this is from Trent.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what this. What? Trend. I assume it's Trend Micro because that's what John said. It doesn't say it on there. That's no one wrote it down. So sorry. But we thank all of our vendors, regardless. Thank you for donating. And oh, sorry. I'm sorry.
Gave it away.
Shoot.
It's all right.
Okay, this one is from Valiant Solutions. It's a Cana Kit Raspberry Pi starter kit. Very cool. Winner is Trevor Topper. Trevor? Is Trevor here? No, Trevor's not here. Steve McGee. Steve? Bueller? DG Thom. DG. That's what I... DG. 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 Okay. CJ Harrison. Okay, we're gonna have to do an. Oh, what? What?
Let me see some identification.
All right. Okay. Let me introduce our next speaker. Oh, okay. I don't know. Do we? I don't have them here. Do we have what? Do we have more? I don't have any more prizes in front of me, so.
We have one from Z-Scaler. We'll give it away at the end of the talk.
Okay, yeah. If Z-Scaler is going to give theirs away at the end, these must be yours?
This one. He's carrying it. Sales guy has it.
Okay. I don't know what these are for, but do you have one? Which list? This one. Okay, this one. Okay. Okay. Todd Austin.
Yeah, just set it right here.
Todd? Iris Windsor? Hey, yeah, that's you. She won. What? This is the list I have. You guys are killing me, okay? I can't work under these. Look, this is the name I have. These are... It's okay.
Hold on here.
So is he. It's okay. Look, those were from the other thing. These were taped to this, and then this is the list.
No, hold on. No, hold on. There's actually a proper thing here.
Oh, God.
Okay, here we go.
Take the prize away
So,
from her.
no, hold on. Okay, so this is the prize from FIA, okay? The Focus drone, the winner is Dave T. Who's Dave T? Is there a Dave T? Okay. How about then...
How about Iris?
If there's no one here, then yeah.
What? Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Okay. How about Dave Buster?
Dave and Buster. Come on, that's
No Dave Buster. Okay. How about Aaron Palermo?
There you go.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. Iris won something, right? You got her name. Iris won something.
That's what I'm saying. I read it from here.
Oh,
yes.
that's a different list. Okay. How about this? The Amazon Echo Spot. Dan Carbonaro. Matt Chicon. Todd Austin. Okay.
There you go.
Thank you, Fia.
So what was it? So this was for something else then?
I don't know where that came from.
Okay, you kidding me. Those must be something else.
This is part of this.
Okay. Anyway.
Hold on. That's this.
Can we move on?
Are you done? Is that it?
Yeah, I think so. All that's left is here. You won more Bitcoins though. Thank you, Pavan. Make me look like a
Winner,
jerk.
Ron Taylor.
What did I win?
I don't know.
My name is on there, so I must have won something. Don't mess around with me, dude.
Okay.
I won something.
So pick.
All right.
Okay, this is the grouping for Zscaler. Top 1, 2, 3. Okay.
Okay. But they're going to do it. He said he's going to do it after the talk.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
Okay. Great. I will take the stuff away.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right. That wasn't awkward. Sorry. Anyway, all right. Congratulations to everyone who won prizes. Okay, so our next talk is from Ron Burkett. He is the Director of Sales Engineering at Zscaler. He's got 20 years of experience in the networking security industry and has been deeply involved in developing emerging security and networking strategies for Fortune 1000 customers. Ron currently is tasked with helping customers develop zero trust networking strategies by adopting, did I say something wrong? Oh, okay. Okay, sorry. Your introduction, you're messing me up. All right. Okay, currently Ron is tasked with helping customers develop zero trust networking strategies by adopting cloud software defined networking strategies and FedRAMP certified solutions for U.S. federal government agencies. Thank you, Ron.
Good evening. How's everyone doing tonight? Woo, BSides Raleigh. All right. So, hey, you guys kind of already saw the next slide. I was at the booth today, and one of the guys came by and he said, hey, I really like BSides because you guys have so much more and better beer than the DevCons. And I thought about it. I'm like, yeah, what's relevant to that? Well, so, yeah. Too early? Is that bad? No, so yeah, I just couldn't resist having a little fun while we were here and saying, yeah, I like beer too. In fact, I still have mine, so I hope you're all drinking and enjoying the evening, so thank you. Anyways, it has nothing to do with what I'm talking about, but everything's always a little better if you have beer mixed in. So, we've all grown up with networks and building traditional perimeter security. By the way, I'm struggling to stand here. I like to walk when I talk, but they gave me a fixed microphone and a camera in back. So if you see me grabbing on, I'm about to throw this podium because I'm used to walking around. But anyways, networks are great, right? But we've all built them for years. They've been around. There's a couple problems with them. One of them is users, right? If we didn't have any users on our networks, wouldn't they be great? So little quote here from one of my favorite characters, Michael Scott. When the Crown Prince of Nigeria contacts you directly, you don't ask questions, you help where you can, right? So this kind of describes how our users interact with our networks. They have no clue that they're doing things wrong, even when they're well-intentioned. Or if any of you are unemployed and you're sitting at home watching Maury Povich all day long, all right? When asked, what did you click on, you said nothing. The 12 toolbars in your browser determined that was a lie. So we've all been there. Users are tough, right? They do things they shouldn't. They don't have a clue. and they're just trying to do their jobs. The end result in a lot of cases is compromises for us as security professionals dealing with the issues that come as a result of users not being educated. And it doesn't matter how hard you try. So, you know, I started thinking, what's it really take to protect your network? And how do you keep the bad guys away? So I'm like, well, let me think about what should be a really simple network to secure. So I started thinking back to some things I did on my own home network. So I'm like every good IT geek, right? And that I spend a lot of time locking down my home network and using all the technologies I've worked with over the years to build a secure network. Now, just for a little background, that means, yeah, in my home I have a really expensive power bill, a bunch of EXX servers, tons of IoT devices in today's worlds, you know, cameras, Amazon Echoes, you name it, using the internet. No big deal. I also have, you know, a typical user base. I have the Michael Scotts of the world on my home network, as well as some sophisticated ones. So, but you would think it's still relatively easy. I'm just protecting, you know, my wife, you know, my 3 boys, 2 of them teenagers, 1 of them preteen, and a foreign exchange student from South Korea. Now, I did say South Korea. Don't worry, it's not a North Korean hacker, right? This is South Korea, easy kid to deal with. Should I be able to keep that safe? And we would logically think if that's all you have to protect, I should be able to do it and keep it safe. So like any good IT geek, I kind of put everything in my house. You know, full next-gen firewall, full SSL inspection. Actually, not just SSL inspection. I had it twice. I had 2 different devices doing it, feeding different things. I actually had full packet capture in my house, right? So I had content filtering, AV scanning, IPS, IDS, literally. So, you know, again, all that for 5 users, a handful of IoT devices should be good to go, right? And, you know, as I went through it, first of all, I don't want to completely knock it. It was good. Caught my, at the time, 14-year-old boy sneaking up at night playing Xbox. Of course, no one plays without being online, right? So it was really easy to track his activity. He wasn't really happy with the results. Caught another one of my boys actually using Instagram as a chat mechanism because we didn't allow him to chat with people at the time. He was a younger kid, didn't want him chatting with all the girlfriends out there. And they were actually going on Instagram in the comment section and tagging each other, and they were meeting at Jake's face. Is what they did every night. And they would literally get together and we found it. So my security tools served their purpose. In fact, my kids would say, Dad, why is it so hard here? No other kids get this level of scrutiny. And I said, well, that's what happens when your dad's in IT, right? You have to deal with these type things. But, you know, again, you would think it'd be relatively easy to secure. But, you know, again, you put an Xbox on your network, a Ring doorbell. And what did I have to do for SSL inspection? I had to make an exception. What did I have to do for my other tools? I had to make an exception. You know how many times I rang the Ring doorbell and drove my dogs crazy trying to test why the Ring wasn't working? It's crazy, right? Now, I know this is a consumer level device. And you're saying, Ron, I don't have those type things. But the fact is, you know, when you have all these different things out there, you're building exceptions for them, right? And it makes it very difficult to have a secure network. In fact, you know, as it turns out, I thought I had it really good. So in fact, it was so good, I made a video for the company I worked for at the time and said, look, my kids came home with their friends and they were watching illegal movies. They didn't even get a virus. Because they started talking about this thing I'd never heard of called Putlocker 9. And then all of a sudden, they're playing videos of movies that are currently in the theater. And I'm not talking like the quality where someone recorded it with a camcorder. I'm talking full HD quality. And you know, my antennas are just up and going off and going crazy, like, what are you guys doing? So I started looking at the logs and all my traffic, and I found all kinds of bad stuff, and it was blocking it. And I'm like, this is great. So I actually said, kids, this is good. Bring all your friends over. Play all the bad stuff, and I'm going to record the traffic. And I did, and I made this really cool video, and I went around proudly proclaiming on my network security pitches throughout the U.S. saying, look, you can even watch illegal movies and we'll keep you secure. And so I was at the height, right? And what always comes before, you know, right before the fall, you have that pride right before it. Well, yeah, we're not gonna go there, right? So, anyways, a few months later, turns out I started looking around at one of my servers running on my LAN, and you know, I had a bunch of files there that shouldn't have been there. Now, thankfully, it wasn't serving it to the open internet, but They made it inside my network. Guys, I'm back. Thank you. I think the AV has a virus here. So, so the point was, I couldn't even keep my wife, 3 teenage boys, and a foreign exchange student safe on my network. And by the way, I didn't just have the vendor I worked for. I had every one of you that uses some other security device, I had that in there too. All right, every one of those devices, and I couldn't do it. So, you know, how do you deal with it? And you're like, Ron, it doesn't matter. What you said, you know, again, I have all these other tools. I have a lot of people looking at this, and they're dealing with it on a daily basis. And if that was the case, we wouldn't see things like the Verizon breach report, or, you know, people wouldn't make statements like, it's not a matter of, you know, if you get hacked, it's a matter of when you get hacked. And we've all heard these statements, and we know there's at least a certain amount of truth to them. So, you know, I was sitting down with a good friend of mine. Like most IT guys, he likes to drink scotch and smoke cigars with me, which, by the way, anyone will stay out tonight, I'm happy to, you know, help you understand how to do that well. So he's like, Ron, it doesn't matter. I have network segmentation. He goes, and this guy happened to manage a network for a school district. By the way, again, school district kids will do anything to get to what they want, right? He's like, we don't care if they even get infected. We just re-image their machines. They're on a separate network from all of our administration. I said, huh? He goes, yeah, don't you have HIPAA and PCI and other regulations with student data and health records and everything out there? And they said, yeah, but again, they're in a different network. I said, oh, so the student's not allowed to plug in or steal his teacher's password and get on the Wi-Fi for the administrative network? He goes, well, no, I can't help it. And then the other IT guy next to me goes, yeah, Ron, he's a school district. I have NAC too. All right. Yeah, who in here has tried to implement NAC? Yeah, and who here has no exceptions to their NAC and it works perfectly? Uh-huh. Right, yeah, we've all been there. Look, it's an awesome tool. I'm not saying you shouldn't do NAC. I'm not here to downplay NAC. It's great. I would highly suggest you all have it. However, let's not pretend that it's going to give you peace of mind and it's really going to make things work because every copy or every other type of device in the world you make an exception for, or worse yet, the VP comes in and says, hey, I can't get to where I need for my iPhone or my iPad. And then you build yet another exception, and you're trying to relate a user to layer 3, layer 4 rules and ACLs you have on your network equipment. So, you know, NAC, again, it sounds good, but with the explosion of IoT and contractor access to different devices today, it's really hard to have a comprehensive NAC strategy. So what ends up happening is you have this crazy and vicious cycle. You constantly are trying to defend against the latest threat. You find there's a lot of cool things out there to stop that threat. You put it in your network, right? You block it and another threat comes and it just keeps coming over and over, right? It's kind of like, hey, we had another breach. Guess what? We got a little more money. Oh yeah, we get another tool, right? And there's just a few vendors in the cybersecurity space, right? You know, a few hundred. It's one of the highest backed venture capitalist industries in the world because there's so many threats and so many different ways to defend against it. And look, there's a lot of good vendors up here, right? They do a lot of really good things. I'm not suggesting you shouldn't do basic blocking and tackling and protect your network, but it just keeps becoming a vicious cycle. So here's a picture of one of our customers' networks. This is all the active endpoints in their network at a given snapshot in time. So hundreds of thousands of endpoints, all different types of endpoints, all different types of users from, you know, Michael Scott to the millennial that knows how to actually use his computer well, all using that network and all creating different security related types of events, right? And so, you know, we've all lived this world. The way we've done it in the past is we built this castle moat mentality. We build our networks, we put a stack of security devices there, keep putting more and more security devices there. And of course, we have users traveling outside and they want to get back in the network, so we put a stack of security appliances to let them get back in the network. We do the same thing for remote offices. We connect the remote offices and make our network even bigger, right? And now a lot of us are going, hey, no worries, I'm moving to AWS, I'm moving to Azure. put my network stack in there. But yeah, what are you doing? You're putting the same security stack in there to protect your users going in and out. And all you've done is make your network footprint even bigger. And again, we're all guilty of this. We've been doing this for the past 15, 20 years. So at the end of the day, if you really honestly approach it, you can't secure your network. You can't afford your network. You can't write it and grow it and scale it in an efficient manner. You really don't trust your network. You see the quote there from GE. He said, our network has morphed and grown over time to become essentially an unmanageable beast. All right? And that's the truth of what a lot of us have, because we have so many things. They've just gotten bigger, and we keep adding tools and complexity to it. So it all begs the question, why do you still have one? Why are you still trying to look at the old world and the old ways of doing it, saying, why do I still have a network? You know, it's kind of like this. So if you ever travel to Florida, take a look at the sticker on any of their vending machines. And it basically tells you, if they don't have this sticker, call us. Well, first of all, that's kind of hard. So why do you need a sticker to tell you that? Because you can't call about a vending machine problem. So why do you have to have the sticker? Because you just have to have one. That's how most people look at their networks. Because someone told me I had to have a network. I had to make it bigger and give everyone access to it. I didn't do that again. It's all right. So at the end of the day, I don't need slides, right? At the end of the day, we have more risk, more complexity. We have no easy way to secure users, right? And so we have to really start thinking about different ways we can approach this. And this is where Zero Trust Networking was born. So Zero Trust Networking is a completely different approach, right? Instead of making your network bigger, adding your remote sites to your network, we're going to take a different approach and say no one is automatically trusted. So that's, again, that's the fundamental flaw that we've all worked with over the past years. If they can get on our network, they're allowed to get to the applications. We must trust them if they can get on the network. That means we're trusting that our NAC and our network segmentation and our ACLs and everything else are correct. But it's just not the reality in today's world. They've become so complex. So Zero Trust Networking is about saying, I'm only going to allow a user, after I've authorized who they are, done some type of posture checking, verify that they're actually a user, not stolen credentials because they're on a valid machine. Maybe we even validated their location. Hey, this user just, we know that travel, booked them on a flight to Singapore, so it's okay, they're accessing it from Singapore, but this user wasn't, so even though their machine or their user passed the credentials, they're not safe. So then you give them access to an application. So no more, I'm on the network, and I directly have access to applications. That's what Zero Trust Networking is about. What it really means at the end of the day, too, is that you now simplify your network design. Where your applications live, just need outbound internet access. Where your users live, just need outbound internet access. They connect to some controller, could be in a cloud or could be hosted somewhere private. That controller then makes a decision and says, based on who you are and based on posture, that you're able to get into that application. Now, the cost savings alone on networking costs, MPLS, things of that nature, can make this very attractive to anyone. You say, wait, Ron, it's kind of a panacea, right? Well, yeah, but there's actually companies doing this. Google Beyond Corp has done it today. Companies like GE have done it today. Many others are on that path. And when you start thinking in that manner, it really reduces what you have. Now, it's going to create a few other problems, but let's just review a few other important things that you want to think about when you're designing a Zero Trust network. One, never put users on your corporate network, right? They can only access applications if they're going through your software-defined perimeter, right? All your application policies are app-centric rather than network or layer 3-centric. If you make policies based on layer 3, you're depending on a network team to build out the ACL correctly. You're depending on the complexity being there. You're not overrunning CPUs on equipment that's not meant to have that. And keeping up with all that and how things are designed and that someone didn't put an application where they shouldn't. But two, that doesn't mean you just put your applications on the internet. They should be completely dark to the internet. Right? A user should only gain access to them because the software-defined perimeter allowed them to gain access. But we should allow the transport medium to get them there to be the internet, which is point number 3. Right? If we can make the internet the transport, now all I need is a user to sit at home, sit at Starbucks or a branch office, and guess what? They all look the same. Right? And that really simplifies my networking for my branch offices. All my branch offices now can be very cheaply connected sites that looks very much like an internet cafe. I don't have to buy expensive maintenance contracts. I don't have to buy expensive MPLS links. I don't have to buy a lot of things. In fact, you can buy some really low-end devices, even if and you could certainly use other things like SD-WAN to incorporate with it. If you do have a few needs or traditional networking things like VoIP that you need to route back to the corporate office, that's fine. So it doesn't preclude anything like SD-WAN, but it says we're going to use our internet as our transport. And then last but not least, you shouldn't depend on any network-based segmentation. This should all be at the app level. It should inherently say that this user or this group or whatever definition you want to make is what controls access or who has access to that application. Right? So all this should happen, by the way, transparent to the end user, because we want to make the end user process better. One of the biggest problems when people will start extending their network and adding branch offices, adding lots of VPN concentrators, is the fact that at the end of the day, user experience is bad. First of all, half of them don't even know how to fire up a VPN. Anyone here ever try to use a VPN on GoGo on a plane, by the way, too? That works well, right? And then a user spends the whole time struggling with it. They start revolting. And there's the start of a lot of your shadow IT because you haven't made it easy for your users. So we want to do something that allows the performance to work, but yet makes it easy to manage and doesn't make our network that unmanageable beast. So what are some of the things that you can do to start down this path? Number one, and you should know I'm being serious when I tell this because Zscaler has nothing to do with authentication. You need to get your authentication in order, right? So authentication is a main tenet of zero trust security or zero trust networking and software-defined perimeters because you need to prove who you are first. Once you prove who you are, then you can gain access to applications. So if you haven't already started this path, make sure you're cleaning up, getting to a good SAML-based provider. Start integrating all of your SaaS-based apps into it as well. So you have one single source of truth of who is out there and what they're allowed to access. So two, what else can you do? You can start with those nasty contractors. Man, I feel bad for Target. They've been the story of so many people's speeches for years because of the HVAC contractor that you've all heard about. I realize if you start on a journey to zero trust networking, that it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be something you may do overnight. So why not start with the guys that you really don't want on your network at all in the first place? Make them start using a zero trust networking. Then start discovering, start cataloging your applications so you can build out the appropriate policies. Because again, we want our policies to be app-centric, not layer 3, not network-centric, and define what users can get to what applications. And then 3, as you're preparing, expect your network team to hate you. Right? You're threatening their jobs. Because you just said, I need to replace every site with an internet cafe. All right? An internet cafe. Do you need BGP and a bunch of, I know I'm in Raleigh, right, in RTP, and I might be saying the wrong thing here. But do you need all these complex networking strategies? No, you need a device that can simply forward your traffic out to the internet, right? An application on an endpoint potentially to help you with that software-defined perimeter and posture checking. So expect that you're going to have a problem. Don't underestimate it. This is the biggest area most people struggle with. They start throwing up all the different issues of why you can't do zero trust networking, because again, if you start down this path, you're threatening the livelihood of a lot of people's jobs and what they do for a corporation. In the end, because you've simplified your network, which is one of the reasons why you've increased performance and why you've been able to then gain a lot better security around your applications. And see, you didn't even have to hear anything about Zscaler today. I did that all vendor neutral. Any questions or comments from the audience? Go ahead. Correct. Yeah, great question. So for those of you who didn't hear the question, it says you're assuming you have a user behind every endpoint. What do you do for things like phones and cameras that don't necessarily have a user behind them? And that's a great point. Those type of items typically don't need access to the network in the same way either. Or if they do, it's a very separate network for that distinct purpose. And that's why, you know, zero trust networking providers should also work closely with all your different SD-WAN providers. That's where a lot of them come in. You're also seeing the advent of things like Skype for Business. It's a cloud-based controller. They just need access to the internet. You don't actually have to have it communicate directly except for peer-to-peer direct phone conversations. And in those cases, again, you may have some type of SD-WAN or simple, even homegrown VPN backhaul for isolated network just for voice that no other application or user traffic is on. And that's typically how you would deal with a lot of those IoT type devices. Does that make sense? Yeah, go ahead, question. Fair statement. It's a, but that's not what I'm saying necessarily. That's the result of it. Yes.
You're buying all this network equipment, and you depend on it. You just have to keep buying more.
Yeah.
Because the next problem depends on buying more equipment. But the other thing I wonder is, are you drawing any of your zero trust stuff from Project Jericho?
Project Jericho. So I can't say personally if any of our developers or any of our early thought leaders actually were involved or knew that. It's something in our case with our company has been mentioned. There's been a lot of things from our own customers as well as Google Beyond Corp, as well as some of the things in the federal government that have been asking for this type technology and kind of just saying, boy, I wish I didn't have to have all these things. Help me, Zscaler, you know, imagine how I could accomplish this goal. And, you know, Zscaler didn't start with zero trust networking. We started with protecting outbound internet access. And out of these conversations is what was born when they said, man, we're trying to stop the bad guys from keeping mostly the end users from being infected, right? And then catch any outbound traffic when something is infected, whether it be an end user or some other point. But how could we prevent it and never make it happen? Which is to separate it, and that's how it was born at Zscaler, so a little bit different background. But to answer your question directly, I have no clue if any of them had any involvement or knowledge of Project Jericho. Good question, though. Any other questions or comments? Go ahead.
How would you recommend security network?
Take it away. The question was, how would you recommend security network from a teenager? Man, my kids are tough.
The only reason I ask is because my family has nothing to do with like information security, and I'm the only one that's like actually pursuing it, I guess you can say. And I haven't really covered networking yet. I've just done like penetration testing and security and stuff. I know a good bit about networking, but I don't think I could secure it myself.
Yeah, so I still make my youngest kids slide their phone under the door at night. Yeah, nothing like a good old school, you can't have access to it. And, you know, soup Nazi, no soup for you. You know, that works. I certainly, you can get any level of consumer devices today, in all honesty, though, and do things like shut off the internet at night. That's where I start. And, you know, I thought I heard a comment back there. I'm not sure what it was, but yeah, I keep them off of it. I mean, look, kids are smart. I shared the story of my kid on Instagram using his chat because we blocked chat from them. They're going to find a way around it. I mean, so are your users in your corporate network. If they want to do something. So look, you should never forego basic blocking and tackling and internet security for whether they're home users or corporate users. That means when users go out to the internet, you want to do everything from content filtering to AV scanning to SSL inspection, a lot of the things that I talked about. You know, at home, that's going to be harder to do all those things. At home, you're going to settle for some basic content filtering. Even Zscaler offers things in partnership with some of our OEMs like Arrow Wireless, where they use our shift-based product for DNS-based security. It's a good start for a home user. There's no perfect answer for that. For a corporate user, again, you want to make sure you're doing all those things because you don't want anyone to do credential stealing or harvesting, even if you block the bad malware. Yep. Yes.
Try to make the endpoints as secure as possible. Seriously, if you run a basic endpoint firewall, the Windows Defender, the Windows Essentials, there's assume that the network will be compromised and try to work your endpoints as secure as possible. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, there's a question back there.
You mentioned partnerships. Do you feel like layer 7 application firewall, daemon, and antivirus on firewall for small office, home office users is going to become more pervasive in coming years?
So just to make sure I understand the question correct, you asked about layer 7 application type firewalls and AV scanning right on the firewall. Are you talking about for things you're hosting internally and serving to the internet, or for users going outbound? Yes. So the inbound stuff is different. Most people they're not going to do much of anything on the inbound side on a consumer level device. It's too complex of a world, especially with SSL, and the average consumer is not going to understand how to put their web server certificate on their firewall as well to do all those type of things. For outbound, most definitely it's going to get better, but there's going to be limits. Try explaining to a home user how to set up man-in-the-middle SSL inspection. And try to make sure they understand that it doesn't work for their iPhone because they do cert pinning. It's going to be incredibly difficult to teach them how to do that and build exceptions. Even myself, I mean, that was one of the things, my points of talking about being difficult to secure your network and making it complex is the fact that I had to build so many exceptions when I ran all these network devices in my network and security devices that literally, I mean, I had ACLs and policy-based routing going on in my home network, and I had all kinds of stuff. And then I said, well, I have a guest network. I want to make sure they can't get over my other network where all my media files are at. And that was for 5 users. And so it's incredibly difficult. So yes, they're going to get better. They're going to do some of the things, and they're going to come with a lot of free services. But they're always going to be basic level services that are easy to turn off. From a consumer point of view, the worst thing you can do is block something and break it rather than let them get infected. So it's a completely different mindset than corporate. And that's why iPhones and those type devices have caused so much trouble for us, is because we're trying to bring a device that was really designed in a consumer model into a corporate network, and we've had to build exceptions, which again gets to the whole point that Lisa so eloquently pointed out for me, which is you cannot secure it. Right? Which is why you want to think about your applications differently and get them completely on a separate network. All right, am I about to get yanked? I see someone walking towards me. Is my time up? All right, go for it.
People here who don't have this problem, you're lucky. Legacy applications, think green screen, 3270 terminal, that garbage that from yesteryear.
Yep.
Is that all have to be re-architected to support a model like this? Does the architecture of the network around that have to be done differently, or will this natively support this ancient application?
So good question. So the question was, a lot of our old applications like 3270 terminal emulation, will this work in this zero trust model, or do you have to re-architect them? So every vendor's implementation of zero trust networking has its own nuances of how they work. In the case of Zscaler, it's going to work with any IP-based protocol, right? So I shouldn't say any, there's always exceptions, right? But anything that's client-initiated connection, right, is going to work. And so it's not limited to port 80 and 443 if that's what you're asking, typical HTTP, HTTPS. There are versions of that with a lot of vendors, and those are typically what people call browser type access. And those don't require a client or an agent on the endpoint. If you want to get above anything that's above a web browser, you're almost always going to have an agent on the endpoint accessing that application, because you're going to have some type of shim in the network stack to forward traffic to it. Again, there are other things like even active FTP is a great example of something that's very hard to make work in this model, because there's a connection initiated by the server. And it's not quite the same as a firewall. You don't want an application layer gateway sitting on there to allow it to automatically open up a connection inbound. So there are a few apps that would fall into that category, but by and large, most apps are going to work in this model. You know, VoIP is the question asked earlier is another great example of something you don't want to send over a TLS tunnel because it's latency sensitive. And all these models are going to depend on some type of TLS or secure tunnel. And so you're going to want to send that traffic raw and direct. But I guess if you're having a private conversation, that might be a little scary, but you're already doing that today and sending it over all these public links. Yeah.
Your first thing to do is to know your user, essentially. And that applies across the board, whether it's green screen or an IoT device talking all by itself instead of something in your network.
Yeah.
That goes a long way towards solving a lot of these problems. That's that part first.
Yeah, and it really helps you when you start to implement it well. One of the really cool things about zero trust networking is gone is a day of a business division just turning on an application and people having access to it and IT not knowing about it. Because for them to make it work for their users, if you've totally, again, the goal is a dark data center. No users directly connected to the network. They have no access to the application. So now if you've adopted this model, anytime a business unit adds an application, it doesn't work until you add it to the list of applications and who's authorized to gain access to it. So it really solves a lot of problem and actually helps purchasing and everyone else along the way. Any other questions? All right, awesome. I think last order of business, sorry, before you clap, I have to give away this Yeti that was at the Zscaler booth. Is this the cards that were drawn? Anyone? Who has a list? Here it is, yes. All right, so first name on the list, Adam Noonan. And there's candy in it still, so. Candy. All right, thank you, everyone. Have a great night.
5 minutes. 2 minutes.
2 minutes.
5 minutes.
Sorry, I didn't know you were here.
It's all right, man. Start there. For you?
So this is you, right?
Give me 2 minutes,
all right.
guys. Honestly, give me 2 minutes.
Okay, well, I'll introduce, 2 minutes. Okay, so I'll introduce Justin while we're,
We want to get that on the video, too.
it's too late. It's too late in the day. I'm just kidding. Are you going to give away prizes too, or do you already give away prizes?
The guy that was sitting here, he was the CEO. He was giving away.
Oh, okay. So he gets to give away the
Yeah, I
prizes.
was like, how come I don't get it?
Seriously, you should always save them for after the talk, right? Like,
That's bad marketing strategy.
oh man.
Come on. What?
Should have been asking you for the trivia questions on war games.
That's why I threw it out.
Oh, go.
Oh, okay. All right. So, really quick. Justin, over the past 20 years, he's worked in a variety of places supporting educational nonprofit organizations, all the way to government, super secret squirrel, and Fortune Global 100 companies. This is the part that I like the best. In his spare time, Justin enjoys pina coladas, getting caught in the rain, and he's a Sagittarius. Please welcome Justin Holcomb.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it. You're all still here and maybe only partially buzzed, so I'll try to be a little quick on this. Originally, when I pinged and want to say thanks, but what are we going to talk about? Because we were supposed to get the speaker section right for being a sponsor, and they're like, well, you need to have a real talk. And I was like, oh, like I can't just tell you like what our company does. I'll have to come up with some things. So we took some more stories that we think are kind of interesting and some outcomes. I'm a big fan of war games, and I always like Joshua's kind of insights, right, on fundamentally what's going on. So that's where everything's tied into. I'm one of the owners, Trong and Chad back there, one of the owners of FIA. I won't say too much about it. We're a professional services consulting company, right? So we help companies and organizations really secure themselves, for lack of a better description. If you have more questions, you can come find us. We're not a staffing agency. A few people were saying that up front. I just want to make that clear. But we don't make products. We don't sell products. That's not really our gig. So first off, I want to thank everyone that's involved with BSides RDU. I know it's not easy to put together an event like this. I've done some volunteering and assistance and speaking for the Portland PDX over in Oregon, BSides, where I live. And I know it takes a lot of hard work, a lot of effort to bring the community together. And really, FIA, our company, just started having folks here. We have about 10 strong, and we're growing. And so we really want to be part of the community too. So thank you guys. Thank you. I know Greg, Patrick, and Pavin were folks that I got to interact with, but I know there's a lot more of you out there, so thanks again, and keep supporting the community. There's going to be maybe 3 or 4 war stories, depending on how much time people want to give me, and I'll be available for questions, or we can have a beer afterwards and chat too. There's a fair amount of anonymity for the organizations involved, so I'll give kind of the lay of things that happened and what some of the takeaways that we have from it. So the first war story I'll call Uber espionage. At the time, it was a fairly novel approach that we had seen where a particular set of folks were targeted at the hotel that they were visiting at. So, a lot of times you have to put in, right, like over the Marriott there, what's your last name and what's your room, right? And only certain individuals of that set of folks that were traveling actually received kind of an extra special package. So not only was the Wi-Fi network of the hotel compromised, right, by the third party that was providing it, the people there were being directly targeted depending on who you were. And as soon as that person put in their information, right, and they needed to receive the internet, they were told they needed to update their system, right, for Adobe. The interesting thing is that it really was an Adobe update, and it was signed. It wasn't an Adobe certificate, but as far as Microsoft was concerned, it trusted it because it was a trusted certificate that had been stolen to sign. And it had some special additions, though, right, like a backdoor, a rat, a keylogger. So it was pretty interesting. Also, as soon as it had access, it began immediately establishing other foothold, persistence, enumerating the system and also what was around it, and collecting, or at least searching and then collecting anything that hit a specified file list in terms of keywords. So what happened, we detected and contained it within about 24 hours on this particular team. The reason we were really able to do that is typically when certain folks were traveling, we were on a little bit more of a high alert. We had a pretty good understanding of certain things that should be and not be on our network, especially around certain what we call high-value data sources and high-value data within those sources. So we pay a lot of attention, I know everyone wants, zero trust software-defined networks, but it's not really the reality. So the first place we go when we start working on things is at the network, like DNS, web traffic, email traffic. And looking at that, when we see abnormal user agent strings, a lot of times that's not matching what we normally see for what most folks use. It's either unauthorized software or it's something bad, like a piece of malware trying to look a certain way. So we fire an alarm off of that and have like a human being go look at that a bit more, right? And in this case, it was a legit problem, right? This malware calling back out and establishing its tunnel and then encrypting it was not legit, right? And that's actually what kind of tipped us off in the first place that there might be a problem. So from that, we made phone calls, because at the time, actually, we didn't have pre-positioned tools on the systems to do like an incident response kind of, if you think of like Mirror or FireHX or Carbon Black or Incase or whatever thing you might use or leverage. The only thing we had at the time was it's now IBM Tivoli Endpoint, but Big Fix, so kind of like a precursor to Titanium and things of that nature. So we get some limited information. With folks, though, they were able to reach them and have kind of walk them through how to do, you know, the guerrilla tactical incident response, collect this, do that. So we found a lot of the badness files, right, that we're talking out so that we could start to do analysis. And this was a fun one because within like 48 hours of constant, right, like we were going nonstop, we're able to figure out and decrypt with the decoder because we had the samples what that traffic looked like, because for us, for a while in the packet capture, it was just, you know, encrypted traffic. Didn't mean a lot. But after we were able to decrypt, we could see what commands and sessions and files were going back and forth and what got enumerated and taken off the system. Also, using the intelligence gathered from the malware samples, the certificates used to sign, the callback domains, the whois data, and doing pivot analysis, we're able to pretty quickly build out a graph and associate data from like VirusTotal and other places, pretty likely affiliated, right, infrastructure related to like kind of bad.com that was being used. Other instances where malware might have been uploaded, right, that matched pretty closely to the signature in other TTPs or IOCs or whatever you want to call them, right, in terms of very close mapping, or just really whois data too, showing up with the same whois registrar. It's like, that's really interesting. You must be probably part of bad.com. And then bad 1, bad 2, bad 3 also starts to show up in other malware that's submitted, right, to different places. But we had initial triage and attribution of 72 hours. It's one of the few times, so I like to highlight it, that that's actually the case. Usually, most places it's days, weeks, months, years, which a couple of the other war stories, that was the case. But we were fortunate because we were able to be pre-deployed. And that gets into some of the Joshua insights. I've heard a few of the speakers today. This morning I was kind of absent, but in the afternoon talk about kind of being pre-positioned, and we certainly were, and we always focus on picking something. In this case, it was incident response and breach detection and containment were kind of the biggest concerns. So we focused deep on that data and tried to position as many tools at the time as we could. In particular with the network, we had to build kind of a platform, right, on open source with Bro and Snort, but then we used Splunk, was something we actually buy and pull together, and then we leveraged everything else we could get our hands on, right, that the IT environment had, which was things like a proxy authenticating. We had libpcap just running to do our own packet captures in certain durations in time, right? And then eventually we got a real product called Solera at the time that Symantec owns now. But then we had McAfee and other endpoint security things that we'd leverage too. We did have a good team of people. That helps a lot. And we also had some preset flags and things we knew we wanted to look at, right, when they came across our path to pay extra attention to. And that's where I think the kind of high value target data, right, comes into play. Where do you focus in at if you have host data or you just have data out in the cloud or IoT certain data aspects? If you have network data, you know, what's the most valuable? And for us, we really focused in, like I said, on web, DNS, and also really actually mail traffic too from SMTP. So timeliness, having the ability to query and get that data was really critical too. So whatever you are focused in on. And if you're going to use a dashboard, I'll put in quotes, right, like make it meaningful or useful for the person looking at it. It's just like storytelling. You need the audience to have what they need. And then I'll stress that a thing that helped us there, that you'll see a theme throughout this, and I completely agree with this Zscaler guy on the software-defined network kind of stuff, right? He was kind of saying you need to have identity management segmentation and also like layer 7 app segmentation. Network segmentation is dead. It doesn't stop anything. As soon as someone gets in, they find those credentials, they move around just like anyone else. And so unless you start thinking about it at that layer 7 like approach, whether or not you're going to keep certain network controls and things, you have to have identity management segmentation. And in this case, we had actually, to control lateral movement, something we'd gotten IT guys to do was randomize the local admin passwords. So what you see a lot of places still sometimes is you'll image all the devices, right, with the same local admin password. So as soon as you get compromised, you move laterally really fast with that same admin password, especially in Windows environments, and that's a bad thing. And then inevitably you find somewhere where a domain admin was on that system or touched it or something using a domain admin credential, because that's how things work, right, for backup, or maybe you're doing some vulnerability scans, security people, right, using domain admin to go check everything. It lays around on Windows environments like, you know, just candy waiting for the taking, right? So, and then once you have that, it's pretty much over. But in this case, we had pretty good segmentation that helped contain, right? Someone still got in, and someone's always going to get in, but it helps contain everything. Or story 2, this one's not uber cool, but it was really persistent. And you can see up there the first thing. It was a multi-year, I'll call it APT, state-sponsored, whatever you want to use as a term, sophisticated group that was well-funded. A lot of indications that, you know, that it's state-sponsored. And it was a long response and recovery effort too. So the first phase, I'll call it, right, we don't know how long it was going on. We know it was months, probably maybe even a year, because by the time we found out about it, we didn't know where patient 0 was. We were tipped off about it, and so we started looking around. You know, this is kind of post-mortem, these details, right? And we saw later, actually, from monitoring that particular group and other intelligence or information we were able to gather based on what we found, you know, that they used phishing and waterhole attacks quite a bit, right? And they even had, during the time we started monitoring, wound up using those same techniques on other systems later on during the overall, what I'll call life cycle of this investigation. Phase 2, you know, really I'll say is once we were able to observe and we knew we had a problem, we had forensics devices now deployed, right, on the network that we could kind of look at traffic and starting to collect other things. We knew at this point where their access points into our network were, which were many places, but we were pre-positioned to watch them. And so after a cycle every 3 months, I'll call them the B team, would come in and do systems administration. They'd make sure the passwords that they'd stolen before still worked. They'd figure out what the new ones were. They'd check all of the implants to make sure they're working. They'd remote into the other hosts that were within the infrastructure, and we watched them. It's actually how we found a lot of other infected hosts ultimately, because while they were doing their checkups on their list of I've got these systems and I've got these accounts and I've got this going on, we found more stuff, right, more badness. And that's actually why we were watching. We wanted to know what all they knew and what they were doing, but also how are we going to fix this problem, right? This was a large organization, tons and tons of systems and users. So it's like, if you just kick them out, are you going to keep them from getting back in, right? It's easy to kick someone out, or when you think, you know, like I'm going to, you know, reimage this machine, or I'm going to get rid of this malware, or disable this account, or reset the password. But if you haven't plugged the holes, or at least done something, they're going to get back in. So that was really fun. It was fun to watch them, you know, use our own tools, sometimes install updates even for the servers and things so that people couldn't get in. And then phase 3, actually, I'll say, is that we observed the A team, I'll call them, come in. They used the same systems to come into the network, but then they deployed and pre-positioned new tools for enumeration, key logging, password stealing, and they had dedicated scripts and processes that run through things like PowerShell, SMB, right, where they tried to blend in. They'd go through RDP to other systems, and they were specifically looking for intellectual property, right? Searching for research and development, design specifications, source code, a lot of interesting things. Matter of fact, they had to pivot from a Windows environment into a Unix software distribution environment and go after source code repositories. So they wound up having to use some different tool sets than what had been positioned on the Windows servers that were kind of their access point. Because we were watching them and because time had passed, we were really able to not tip them off what was happening. I know one of the earlier cloud discussions was, right, you don't always want to do the eradication, and I agree with that immediately. We were able to keep them from getting the crown jewels, so to speak, while still continuing this observation and collecting data on them, because we weren't ready yet to do our rebuild and recovery, right? We weren't ready to plug the holes, we knew it. So we didn't want to tip them off that we knew what was going on and we were watching. We were prepared to pull the trigger, though. So what happened here? How did all this come to be, right? So that's kind of the whole story, but initial was actually notification from the government. Thank you, Uncle Sam. It was not a lot of information, but enough to get started. Those were initial IOCs, and like I said, we had a custom network forensics platform on this case too that we deployed, and it allowed us to find a few more things, right? And then we kept pivoting from there after we had took forever to get like images collected, right? It was from organization to organization that was affiliated, things like that. It can be a really lengthy process to get those disk images, all the proxy logs, and then there's incomplete records, right? When it's been going on this long, so you just start to get hints, and then every once in a while you strike gold when you're in a large enterprise like this trying to hunt things down. And the more we got positioned to watch things, the more we would find, right? So when they came back in, they actually helped us the most on that first cycle that we saw after 3 months of going around and checking all the systems. Luckily, this expedited our deployment, so we could deliver more and more visibility. It also, we were able to convince, the people in charge that we should have the patients to watch, to gather this intelligence, and to prepare, right? So really the preparation was the identity management, hygiene and hardening, and that layer 7 type of compartmentalization and protecting the crown jewels. The type of accounts that they had access to were domain admin, enterprise admin accounts, right? And in an Active Directory, you own the world then. So how do you prevent that from happening, being spread out? So we had to have a pretty complex plan. And I think you all know Active Directory or any IDAM solution is like the basis of everything in your environment, right? So if you mess with that, you can break a lot of things. So we prepared and launched like this massive design to kick them out, but also to keep them out. That's really kind of where these then kind of insights come from. We did in this case, for the security team, we'd picked something first to focus on and really push, which was having visibility and data. And at the time, again, that was a network forensics platform, but that's how it let us do more once we had that tipper, right, that we could go look at things. And we had pre-positioned at least the network tools. We had good analysts there too. We also got lucky, right? Someone told us something was going on potentially, so we went and took a look and were able to find more. And because there was something, we were able to do more. Again, we were prioritizing what we thought were our high-value kind of data sources, since we were kind of that moat design, having PCAP, Layer 7, and the ability to kind of deploy custom signatures, whether it was Yara or related to Bro or Snort, really helped us out a lot. And the data that was useful, obviously, was PCAP, who has helped us a lot, actually, in this case, so we could map out additional infrastructure and then go pivot back and look and see if any of those callback domains or other malware samples are being used. And in a couple cases, that was true, so we found more things. And then good, I'll call it threat intelligence, but information sharing. That analyst-to-analyst network can't be underestimated, and even official channels proved useful here, although slower. And patience. This is probably the most patience I've seen of any organization, to have the wisdom to listen and then watch and gain and kind of progress over this and take a little bit of risk, but also control that risk at the same time for gain. It's hard. The first thing people want to do is erase, remove, eradicate, right, and be done, reset the passwords. And IDM, you've got to have identity management, right? If you don't have that shit figured out, it's going to be terrible. So concepts like Microsoft's Red Forest, if you go take a look at that, or I can talk to you about it later. It's a way to, and everyone winds up using Active Directory, but it winds up working with things like Okta, Azure AD, same concepts of how you create true boundaries within identity management. So the same idea of like network segmentation, right? How do you do that segmentation with your identity management, and who the people are, who the devices are? Again, what the Zscaler dude was talking about is a lot of sense, right? You really got to have that. Whether you're keeping your traditional network and all those things, or you go to his zero-defined software network, that's a key place that has to be segmented and controlled. And you got to have really good hygiene. So privilege account management, that kind of thing on there really matters. You can't have these super-duper accounts that allow you to have problems just sitting around, or you're going to have a lot of pain. Third war story. The apocalypse, I call it. It was the same kind of concept that, you have phishing emails, you get initial access. Again, it was those local admin rights and then domain admin rights that eventually led to the downfall and full coverage of this entire enterprise network. You're able to spread laterally really fast, and you become invisible, right? I mean, it's just RDP or SMB or any other number of allowed communication protocols and tools that everyone else is using, and you look like Joe or Bill or Susie or whoever. And so silently for weeks, even months, exfilled a large amount of data, like everything, I'll say. So emails, files, everything was taken. And then they set up their next phase, because that really wasn't their goal. Their goal was more of a FU, I'll call it, because it was, we're going to destroy everything we can, right? And you see more of these attacks happening all the time, more data, through either encryption or manipulation of master boot records or certain key boot files, right? Are just there to make things inoperable, to damage or lose data for organizations and individuals. And so that was the last stage. After collection, they blasted everything. With those kind of credentials too, it's pretty easy to do. So wiping tools and manipulation tools, everything, endpoints, servers, obliterated. Very, very not nice. What happened? Well, it became obvious. All of a sudden, people were like getting into their computer systems and are like, this isn't working. This isn't okay. And everything's down. Mass panic sets in masse. There were other indications, right, in hindsight when you do the investigation, because you can, although it's painful, spend a lot of time recovering these disks if they weren't fully encrypted or files actually securely deleted, right? I mean, everyone knows here probably, right, the data's still there effectively. It just takes time to acquire it and reconstruct it, depending on how much damage was done to the file system or the file itself. So we were able to recover a lot of data over time, like months and months and months, to try to understand, but that took a lot of hindsight time. So there was an army of IT and security folks to create a new temporary network and comms capabilities, as well as to investigate and rebuild to a new operational network, right? So how do we get back to some new state that works? It's really, really, really hard to recover when you don't have domain controllers. They're just gone. Or your backup systems are just gone, right? And I don't mean like, hey, the tapes are there or this other storage mechanism, but when you don't have the encryption keys for that, because they were sitting on one server that wasn't backed up, the backup to the backup, right? All of a sudden, like encrypted like storage sitting around becomes pretty useless. Or even better, assume you have that and the ability to decrypt it, but then you don't have the indexes. When you're talking about manual tape and running through and rebuilding indexes, that takes a long time when you're trying to get things restored. It doesn't work so good. I mean, you're literally sitting there thinking about things spinning again, right, at like this speed I can count on my watch versus solid state drives. That's really painful. So there's some, thoughts there, right, about insights from Joshua at the end. And then it makes investigation and response really slow. Everyone wants to know why, what, are they going to get back, what's happening, but like I said, you've leveled, right? Someone set off a nuke and destroyed this place. It's really hard to get data to answer those questions. And it's competing with the time and resources that you want to get comms and other systems back up too. These organizations have to keep working. So insights, this one was not having forensic stuff pre-positioned, kind of caused some problems. Someone should have noticed at some point when terabytes of data were being exfilled out over their connection. That usually looks kind of bad. So that hurt a lot, right? And then I guess also I think an insight is that destructive attacks are really real now. You hear some in the news, but a lot don't get advertised, right? And where people are pretty harsh towards folks now if they have a reason to be. And it's a good idea to exercise what a complete, destructive attack looks like from a COOP disaster recovery scenario. Because if you lose those domain controllers, right, or those backup systems or whatever it is, that can be pretty impactful in terms of how things are working. Definitely have a backup to the backup, and in particular, we talk about high value data or things to focus in. It's the same thing with this on the IT side. Those indexes are really important. The encryption keys are really important. Certain things like that, right? That are just the crown jewels, the core of the foundation, right? The cornerstone. And DCs, having offline copies and frequently having those updated, and some kind of a backup that's easily accessible or usable is pretty critical typically too. And then honestly, again, I know I'm harping on it, but this idea that you're going to harden and segment at the identity management level and compartmentalization of that matters so much. And also focus where you can have the highest impact, return, and control. This neat little graphic up here, all the other ones have been movie references, but this one has some additional deeper meaning. That's the kill chain there, if you don't recognize it. Lockheed Martin owns that, and a lot of people talk about it. And then the sub breakdown, though, is actually more of a MITRE thing, the attack methodology. There's actually a bunch of information, you get that off of MITRE.org site. It's really cool stuff. Comes from a lot of guys working on red teams or penetration testing or doing offensive computing, building out enumeration and trying to specify what happens in attacks when you move lateral. And those are the areas we focus in as a defender. They just had a MITRE AttackCon conference that they streamed that you might be able to pull down too. It's a good place to go look. But when you talk about in those areas of focus, it's a lot more realistic of where you have influence. Unless you're a super secret squirrel agency, or maybe a company with you don't give a rat's about attack back or doing something, you're not going to do much in the recon phase or weaponize or exploit phase where you're going to deliver an impact. And even if let's say you are investing there for threat intelligence or whatever you want to call it, or information to know what's going on, that can be helpful, but someone's going to get in or do something at some point. And so once they do get in, where do you have control? Where can you invest to minimize what happens? I used to talk to an admiral in the Navy about it, ships used to be made out of wood. You put a hole in it, the whole thing sinks. And now you guys don't build your ships out of wood, right? You compartmentalize, you have segmentation in it. So that way if something breaches, you seal it off so that area floods, but then you can pump, recover, save lives, whatever, right, on the rest of the boat. They've designed these things to be built that way so that they don't just lose everything at once. Right now, usually when you get compromised, you lose everything at once with domain admin, right? Or enterprise admin or local admin being the same everywhere, whatever that is. But again, attack methodology is a really cool way to look at things and think through, and they're constantly refining it. And that's where all of these tools, or if you go to just Zscaler and have no tools, I guess, right? As the guy was talking about, you would have the most impact to control something happening. I think I've got a little bit more time because I don't know how late we ran over, but the last war story was kind of tool dump fun. So I don't know if you've ever been somewhere and a vulnerability comes out in the public, and then like people who are really important come running, like, what's going on? Like, do we have a problem, or you know, are we going to be hurt? You know, are we vulnerable, or are we under attack? You know, or they hear maybe about like exploits or tools being dumped from super secret squirrel places or other types of hackers, right? And it's in the news. It's a really hot thing. That happens to us all the time and our teams and people. So some important people wanted to know, you know, what was going on. Do we have that? You know, do we see it? And in this particular situation, the data set is huge, like exceptionally large. We're talking all of the internet traffic in and out for thousands of large organizations. And so this is, you know, kind of defined, if you think of it like net flow, you know, back and forth, billions of flows a day. But no visibility into endpoints or beyond that. So you just have all this internet data going back and forth between organizations to look for badness and say something. It's pretty hard to do. It's that needle and needles thing someone was making fun of. It really gets difficult, right? It's a big data problem. So how do you build an analytic for NetFlow? Or we have like Snort-like signature capability to apply there too, to find. In this case, you know, it's just kind of one-on-one signature building still, but it's a good process to follow. Build that profile, pull in the lab, this thing's been dumped, you can have a copy of it, build kind of your test harness, right, to run it, automate it, execute it, collect lots of samples and data and enumerations as much as you can. You gotta really stimulate the environment, not to be made fun of. But yeah, you know, you gotta get things working. And then once you have that interaction and data, you know, you can start to do something with it, right? And in this case, we were having a hard time because most of it was encrypted, so it has high entropy, and that looks really hard to detect, or for devices to figure out things on it. So our analyst in this case actually kind of started working with some different visualization methods to profile the data, which wound up being really successful. And he actually kind of extended and built a tool to help with large packet, you know, and other types of data analysis to visualize and look kind of called the water flow method. And I'm talking a little bit past my scope because I wasn't the analyst. But that's what led to seeing basically a commonality, right, outside of all the entropy that was like, ah, that's interesting. Let me zoom in on that. And there's a repeatable pattern that we can detect and do something with. So this is kind of like, again, hard to tell probably up there, but that banding that's circled was an indication of repeating, right, commonality, whereas the rest was pretty much randomness. And so that repeating pattern that we visualized, we could go then dig in deeper and see what that really meant and looked like. And it really turned out to be part of the handshake of the protocol, because it was using a custom protocol for the tool that was being profiled with it. And we could then build a signature around that. Now, it took more tuning and fine-tuning, especially within a massive data set, because all of a sudden you find within massive data sets other things that, you know, look kind of similar to this weird protocol that was being used, because it was a custom written protocol. But still, I guess millions of people in the world, right? There's several false positives, so it got tweaked a bit more. But it worked. And also kind of really showed that visualization of like really weird data that looks like nothing to humans, you know, or you can't find normal things because it's custom. There's still stuff out there, right? When you start to visualize and do clustering and things like that, or look for groupings, it stands out like a sore thumb, and then you can go investigate further. So that was pretty cool. The ability to, you know, have someone that can do coding and help extend tools is really helpful, I would say. It was probably obvious to this crew, but you'll find a lot of places that there's no one enabled to do that, right? There isn't an environment to do it. They may not have the skills, or they have the skills but not the environment and the leeway to do it. It's really important to be able to extend tools, glue them together, do custom analysis, things of that nature. And then enabling that environment is really critical too. And I think that is another thing to credit to this, that enablement was there and the ability to work on that and then apply it in the production environment too, right? And test it further and execute on and refine. So that's kind of the end of my war stories. Any questions? I can't see well with the spotlight, so if I'm not seeing you, you might have to like wave at me like this or something. I'm gonna go with no. That's a no, there's no questions. Everyone go drink, eat dinner. Thank you for coming to. Thanks, man.
Thank you, sir. Oh, don't forget your drink.
Yeah.
Thank you again. Listen, it's not easy to wrap up the show with the last talk, so I appreciate you talking. I appreciate everyone hanging out here. We are going to set up now for Hacker Jeopardy. So I'm going to actually, before we do that, I'm going to plug in, and while we're setting up, did everyone just leave me? Come on, John. John, get some, come down here.
Yeah.
Help me out.
Playing, come on up front.
Everyone. Oh no, everyone's playing. No, everyone's playing.
Yeah, come up front.
Yeah, this isn't a team. Hey, you get down. Get down from there.
No.
Hold on. I'm gonna do some more. I'm gonna do some more trivia while we're setting up.
What? They're right on the...
Yeah, the book. So. Okay. Listen. First of all, actually, I want to thank our AV folks, Adrian Crenshaw here in the back, Iron Geek. Thank you, sir. And Cyrus the Virus. Where is he? I don't think he's in here, but yeah, AV was awesome this year. I have to tell you. I mean, who was here for our BSides at Raleighwood? Yeah, really crappy AV, right? Yeah, we've come a long way from that. And definitely this year we will have, that's true, parking was free.